We're taking some time to revisit and reconsider the Graha and Rashi aspects. I've already covered this once on a previous talk, so you might want to go back and review that. But I believe I have some better charts and some better diagrams now to help you understand the difference between these two. So first of all, what are Graha aspects? What are Rashi aspects? Well, Graha aspects are what we are used to. So for example, every planet aspects the planets directly across from it. So if we have the moon in the first house, the sun in the seventh house, they will Graha aspect each other. Every planet has that aspect. There are also the specific aspects of Saturn, Mars, and Jupiter. Mars aspects 4 houses away, 7 houses away, and 8 houses away. Jupiter aspects 5 houses away, 7 houses away, and 9 houses away. Saturn aspects 3 houses away, 7 houses away, and 10 houses away. We're not going to get too much into that because that's something that's covered in the art and science of Vedic astrology. That's also something that's covered in pretty much every astrological text, hopefully. Now the issue is, what is the difference between these Graha aspects and Rashi aspects? Because people often use them exactly the same, which is not how they're meant to be used. Graha aspects show us how planets share their innate quality. So Venus, Graha aspecting a planet 7 houses away from it, will be sharing its qualities of comfort, of diplomacy, of helping people get their fair share. So these are all innate qualities of Venus. Venus is a benefic planet in that regard. A planet that is 4 houses away from Mars will be getting Mars's 4th aspect. So the innate qualities of Mars will be shared with that planet. Possibly impatience, injury, accident, logic, rationality, all these things which are innate to the quality of the planet Mars itself. And if you need to review those, go back to previous talks that we've done already on this channel, specifically on the planet. So Graha aspects share the innate energy of a planet just by being that planet. Jupiter can promote growth, grace, luck, fortune, wealth. So by him Graha aspecting a planet elsewhere in the chart, he can support that planet in that way. And these are very strongly tied into the Logitati Avashtas. So we do use the Graha aspects with the Logitati Avashtas to see if a planet's getting supported by its friends or hurt by its enemies. For example, having Mars aspecting Saturn. Well, Mars is an enemy to Saturn. So when Mars aspects Saturn, he's going to hurt Saturn. So those things that Mars does to hurt will be impacting Saturn. Okay? Venus is Saturn's friend. So if Venus is aspecting Saturn, then Venus will help Saturn endure, to find comfort amongst hardship, to, again, help others get their fair share. So whenever we're looking at these Graha aspects, we need to consider them as the innate quality of the planet. Okay, now let's talk about the Rashi aspects. And if we look over here, this is the combination of how all the Rashi aspects work. So if you don't already know this, you might want to pause the video and sort of look at these lines. All the red lines, they're mutual aspects. So for example, all active signs, so active signs, you got to know what those are. All active signs are Rashi aspected by all fixed signs, except for the one right next to it. So if we look here at Aries, we see that Aries is getting Rashi aspected by Leo. It's getting Rashi aspected by Scorpio. It's getting Rashi aspected by Aquarius. So here's the arrow and there's the line. Except the one right next to it. So the sign right next to it, the fixed sign right next to it, it's not going to Rashi aspect. Now, it keeps going in this way. So for all fixed signs, we'll just use Leo here, all fixed signs get aspected by all active signs except for the one right next to it. So here's Leo, which is getting Rashi aspected by Libra. an active sign. Again, Rashi aspected by Capricorn, an active sign. And again, Rashi aspected by Aries, an active sign. Okay, so you'll see all these if you study this chart. And then all dual signs Rashi aspect each other. So Pisces aspects Gemini and back and forth. Pisces aspects Sagittarius and back. Sagittarius aspects Virgo and back. Gemini and Virgo aspect each other. Pisces and Virgo aspect each other. And Sagittarius and Gemini aspect each other. So you have to memorize these. It's a formula you have to memorize. And these are specific to Jaimini. Again, we've already discussed that it is in Brihat Parashara Horashastra, but whether it's specifically from Brihat Parashara Horashastra or Jaimini is debatable. And I'm not concerned about the debate because that doesn't matter as long as it works, right? At least that's the way I treat it. Now, what do the Rashi aspects do? Well, this is where you start to see how house lords impact each other, or bhava cusps impact each other. And we'll stick with house lords for now for simplicity. If we have, let's just look at this chart. So we have a Sagittarius ascendant. And we see that, let's see, are any planets Rashi aspecting each other? Okay, so what we see here is that the moon, which rules the 8th house, is in the person's 6th house. All right, so that's going to bring 8th house issues into the 6th house. And this is something you have to kind of work on. So you want to know what the 8th house represents, know what the 6th house represents, imagine how they can combine. We've gone over this previously. This has also gone over extensively in the step-by-step course, the MP3 audio download available at Asheville Vedic Astrology. But now we can start to see how planets impact houses by their house lords. So now we have Mars impacting, because it's Rashi aspecting this person's 6th house. We have Jupiter Rashi aspecting this person's 6th house. Mars rules the 5th, Mars rules the 12th. That means that 5th and 12th house influences are going to be coloring, impacting, bringing together 6th house influences. With Jupiter, we see Jupiter rules the 1st and Jupiter rules the 4th. So Jupiter Rashi aspecting this 6th house is going to not only pull its 8th house influence because it's in the 8th house, but also the indications of the 1st and the 4th into this position. And this is very telling. The 6th house deals with overcoming obstacles, also self-improvement, deals with enemies. 1st house deals with the body, 4th house deals with emotions. 8th house deals with emotions. 8th house also deals with longevity, which shows that a theme in this person's path is going to be dealing with emotional and physical issues to improve themselves. And why do I say improve themselves? Because these are all in good dignity. All right. Oftentimes when I look at dignity, I try to see if a planet's in good dignity, then it's going to add to that thing, hopefully make it better, improve it. If it's in bad dignity, then this would show a very troublesome individual, or who has a lot of trouble with emotional and physical things, especially long-term chronic illnesses. So this is where we're starting to see how it's going to get complicated now, because now we're not just looking at the Rashi, the Graha aspects, but we're also looking at the Rashi aspects. So Graha aspects show us how an area of life is going to develop. If Mars or Saturn's there, it's going to be hard. It's going to take a lot of focus, because those are what those two planets do. So that's the natural quality with the Graha aspects. But now with the Rashi aspects, we're seeing, well, what are the houses that are getting involved that are going to contribute to the sense of suffering or transformation, or however it might play out, depending on the planet. So always remember that when you have a planet in a sign, it's always going to pull its house rulership qualities into that sign. So Jupiter ruling the 1st and the 4th going into the 8th, that's a profound combination for psychological understanding. This person is would be a great psychological counselor, or dealing with occult sciences, because we have the emotional nature, we have the person's body and personality going into the 8th, so they're naturally going to be pulled to 8th house things. and it's exalted here. And Jupiter is the planet that deals with counsel. So Jupiter's natural quality of counsel, this is the planetary or Graha aspect in the 8th, shows that they will be able to give counsel in regards to occult things or occult matters or even psychological matters, deep matters, or even longevity or chronic illnesses. Mars is also Rashi aspecting. No, it's not Rashi aspecting. Mars is bringing its planetary aspect to this 8th house. And Mars's natural quality, the planetary aspect, is dealing with things in a logical, efficient manner. So this person is going to be very logical and efficient in 2nd house matters, of finances, of providing for their responsibilities, because Mars is there as exalted, getting delighted by Jupiter, an exalted Jupiter. And anytime Mars and Jupiter get together, whatever house they're mutually in or mutually aspecting or aspecting each other, there's going to be a lot of wisdom, a lot of grace, and a lot of ability to be rational and logical. And so when you get wisdom and logic together, that's amazing. You do a lot of good things. So it'll go that way with finances, it'll go that way with responsibilities, it'll also go that way with 8th house affairs. And this is the planetary aspect, or the Graha aspects. So this is how we start to use these things. Planetary aspects bring the innate quality of the planet, and those are the Graha aspects. Innate qualities, just the planet in and of itself. And we're not talking about karakas here, just the qualities. Rashi aspects show us how different houses get tied together. Let's see if I can come up with a good example here. Okay, so we have the sun here, Rashi aspecting the 9th house. So the sun rules the 9th house. It is in the 5th, and it is Rashi aspecting the 9th house. And so this strengthens all 9th house affairs, because we have the ruler of the house, Rashi aspect in it, 9th house, guru, consistency in one's dharma, in one's path, in one's purpose, consistency in marriage. And then having the ruler of the 9th in the 5th, well, the 9th deals with marriage and commitments. That's going to help one with their creativity, with their legacy, with their ability to make good choices in life, to improve upon their life. So we start to see this web developing. And this is why when you sit down to study a chart, there's a lot to consider. And this is where you start to get the details. So this is the beautiful part about it all. Once you start to see the planetary aspects and the Rashi aspects, and you know what they're used for, well, then you start weaving together the tapestry of a person's life, and you move beyond just saying, well, you're going to have difficulty having children, to saying, oh, well, you're going to have difficulty having children because your spouse is maybe impotent or infertile. Or you're going to say, well, you're probably going to get married, but maybe when you have children, that's going to ruin your marriage, because the 5th house lord is Rashi aspecting the 7th or the 9th, and it's in bad dignity. So now, you see, we're putting it all together. It's fascinating stuff. Things we really have to think about. So for this chart as well, having Mercury exalted, ruling the 7th and the 10th, well, this is going to make a person, number one, since it's Mercury in the 10th, they're going to be able to very much manage their career and their status and their profession, because Mercury deals with management as a natural innate quality. It'll also give a person profound interest in their work. Some people, they're not interested in their work. They do it to pay their bills and to enjoy life. But when we get Mercury here, which is a planet of interest, in the 10th, well, not only do they do a good job, but they're very interested in it. And the more interested you are, the better you do. And Mercury rules the 7th. And so having the 7th lord go into the 10th, well, partnerships, even the spouse. But there'll be a strong sense of needing to build partnerships in order for a career to work. You see? So these are fascinating. Now, let's move on to another topic here. And this is something that you really want to study and think about. Again, these things are covered in the MP3 download classes on AshevilleVedicAstrology.com. Specifically, you probably want to look at the Jaimini classes offered by Ernst Wilhelm on that site. There's 3 of them, which I've already talked about. And they will tell you all about these Rashi aspects and how they work and how to use them in the Jaimini system. And then you start to overlay them with the Parashara system, which, again, some people say it's the same, but it's neither here nor there. And this is where the details come in. Now, this chart I wanted to use this a long time ago. Let's see if I can make it a little bit. Okay, so this explains planetary aspects in the specific aspects. And what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is there's the aspects that we talked about, aspecting 7 houses away, Mars aspecting the 4th, the 7th, and the 8th, Jupiter is the 5th, the 7th, and the 9th. Well, those are general. Those are not specific at all. And sometimes you'll be wrong with them because they won't be correct. You won't have correctly calculated them. Because aspects are meant to be calculated down to a point system called virupas. And so if we look at this chart here, these are aspects for the Sun, Moon, Mercury, and Venus. And the maximum amount of aspects you can have is 60 points. And so if we see how would we describe this for you? Okay, so we have 90 degrees here. That would be the 4th house. Okay, so 4 houses away, both Sun, Moon, Mercury, and Venus are going to have 3/4 aspect power to any planets 4 houses away, or 90 degrees away. And that will be 45 points out of 60. And you might not even think about that. Why? Because you're not used to thinking about Sun, Moon, Mercury, or Venus as having any kind of aspect to the 4th house. But it does. It's only 3/4. But it's still 45 points, which is better than average. Average is 30. So all these planets are going to aspect 3/4 to 90 degrees away. And as we see in this graph, even when a planet is at 60 degrees away, it gets 1/4. And that's only 15 points out of 60. But as it slowly moves up, it gets more and more points. That means that in between 60 and 90 degrees, there could be anywhere between 15 and 45 points of aspect. And if you don't know that, then you can miss some very important things within a chart. And then, of course, after 90 degrees, it starts going down until we get to 150, and it's back to 0 again. Once we get to 150 and back up to 180, which is the 7th house aspect, now we're up to 60 points, which is what we've been talking about. The 7th house aspect for these planets gives a full 60 points. And then after that, as it moves away from the 7th house, going to the 8th, the 9th, and so on, until we get 300 degrees away, it's back down to 0. So in between the 7th house, in between 180 degrees and 300 degrees, there's still going to be some level of influence there. And this is why oftentimes people will say, oh, well, this event's there, but I don't see it by aspect, because they're not using the virupas. And that's understandable, because it's only recently that we've had computer programs that can easily calculate this. Before there were computer programs, you had to go through and do all this by hand. And so what astrologers did was they found the basic full-on aspects and just used those. Because you don't need to compute it. Most of the time you'll be right, but you miss all these subtleties. So this is why being able to understand the precise aspects are important. And I don't know how many programs do this, because I've only used Kala. Kala, which is Ernst Wilhelm software. I've used it for, well, over 10 years now, 12 years maybe, even longer than that, I think. I don't know, how long has it been out? But anyway, point being, it calculates this for you. It gives you a table. You can see them very easily, very quickly. And you need to know these to see how strong is a Logitati Avashta, how strong is a negative or positive aspect going to be. And again, this is particularly for planetary aspects. We're not talking about Rashi aspects. Rashi aspects are either full on or full off. There's none of this up and down. Now, let's go ahead and look to the aspects of Saturn. So if we pull up that graph, let's see here. Okay, so if we pull up this graph, what do we see? Well, this is reflecting 60 degrees away, that's the 3rd house aspect, full 60 points. Down 150 degrees, 0 aspect. Back to 180 degrees, that's the 7th house aspect, full 60 points of impact. And then back to 270, which is the 10th house aspect typically, back up to 60 points. Now this is important because maybe you have a planet that's in the 1st house, and let's say that it is in the last degrees of the 1st house, and then you have a planet in the very beginning degrees of the 11th house. So that's just going to be probably between 270 to 275. So if a planet's 275 degrees away from Saturn, even if it's not in the 10th house, it's still going to get about 50 points of aspect. And that's what I mean by you're going to miss some of these things, because most people would say, oh, this planet is in the 11th, Saturn's in the 1st, so therefore there's no aspect. But if we use the Virupa system, which is talked about in Brihat Parasha or Horashastra, we see that from 270 to 300, there's still going to be some aspect there. Okay, And even in between the 7th house and the 10th house, well, if a planet's in between the 7th house from Saturn and the 10th house from Saturn, it's through that entire spectrum, 7th to the 8th to the 9th, so 8th and 9th house, is still going to have a full 30 points of aspect, which is average. So that means any planets in the 8th or 9th house from Saturn is still getting hit by Saturn by at least 30 points, which means you need to consider that aspect. Okay. Hopefully you're seeing this here, how this table is working. And so you don't want to necessarily base it on the houses. You want to base it on the degrees away from the particular planet in question. So with Saturn, 60 degrees, 3rd house, so 60 degrees away from Saturn's 3rd house. 180 degrees is the 7th house. 270 degrees is the 10th house. Same thing with Mars. Okay. So with Mars, 90 degrees away is the 4th house aspect, full 60 out of 60 points. Goes down to 0 at 150 degrees away. And then between 180, which is the 8th house, 180, which is the 7th house, and 210, which is the 8th house, clear through the 7th through the 8th is full 60 points. But again, you want to go by the degrees, not necessarily the houses, because again, you can have a planet in the last degrees of the 1st house, and then you could have it in maybe the beginning of the 9th house, and it's still going to have somewhere between 60 to 45 points of aspect, which is a strong aspect, but you're not going to think about it because you're going to be so locked into that pattern of Mars only aspects 1, 4, 7, and 8. So you see how this works. And again, you can pause the video if you need to see this. This manual is actually a manual from one of Ernst Wilhelm's courses, and he gave me permission to use these graphics. Hopefully he doesn't mind that I'm using the whole manual, only because I couldn't get the graphics out of there to illustrate this point. So let's scroll down. Let's look at, aspects of Jupiter. So here's Jupiter. 30 degrees away, we're starting to get some aspect here. 60 degrees away, you still got 15 points of aspect. That's worth noting. Then it goes up 90 degrees away, 4th house aspect, 45 points. That's strong. That's a strong aspect. So planets in the 4th from, or 90 degrees away from Jupiter is going to be profoundly impacted by Jupiter. Until we get up to the 5th house area, which will be 120 degrees. Then it drops off sharply. Back up to the 7th at 180. And then 9th house at 240. But again, we're not using necessarily the houses. It just so happens that typically this is the way it plays out. We want to look at the number of degrees away from the planet in question. All right. So this hopefully illustrates for you why you have to use the specific Virupas or the specific point system, because you're going to miss a lot of things. You'll do pretty well. So I don't want to make you feel bad if you're just using the basic aspects, because again, for many, many years, that's all I did because I didn't know about this. But after I learned it, a lot of things made quite a bit more sense in regards to planetary influences. And remember, Graha aspects, planetary aspects, if they're bad dignity, then the negative innate quality of that planet will be hurting the planet that it's aspecting. It's just an idea, a thought here, usually in regards to the house that it's in. Good dignity planets help. Now, this gets a little tricky when we start including the Logitati Avashtas, so let's back up a little bit and try to make it easier to understand. So if you understand the Logitati Avashtas, this will make sense to you. If you don't, try not to worry about it. A planet in bad dignity, Graha aspecting a house or a Bhava cusp. If it's in bad dignity, it'll hurt that house based on its innate qualities. If it's in good dignity, it'll help that house. When it comes to aspecting another planet, well, that's a little different because, for example, if you have Moon aspecting Saturn, Moon is an enemy to Saturn, and if Moon is aspecting Saturn by Logitati Avashta, if it's in good dignity, it has profound capacity to starve Saturn. So that's why when we're thinking about planetary aspects, think about the dignity in regards to the aspect that it casts to the particular house or Bhava cusp. If it's bad dignity, hurts that house. Good dignity helps that house based on the innate qualities of the planet. What do I mean by that? If it's Mars, bad dignity Mars will cause injury, will cause a person to pick fights. Good dignity Mars causes a person to do the right thing innately and also to be rational and logical. So rationality and logic will help that house. All planets have these kinds of innate qualities. When it comes to planets aspecting planets, well, that's where we need to really consider the Logitati Avashtas, because we need to understand the friendships between the planets to see, is this planet by aspect actually helping? A friend will help. If it's in good dignity, it really helps. An enemy will hurt, and if it's in good dignity, it will really hurt. If an enemy is aspecting a planet in bad dignity, it doesn't have the power to hurt that planet, assuming the planet involved has some strength on its own. So I know that sounds confusing, but I think you can get the gist of it. And if you want to know more about planet-to-planet influences, study the Logitati Avashtas, download the Logitati class from the website, or wait until book number 2 of The Art and Science of Vedic Astrology comes out, because I've covered all of these in that book, how they work and how they influence each other. But in the meantime, use what you can, use the basics. Start applying them, start thinking about them, start researching them so that you can see all these subtleties that you might have missed before. All dealing with the Graha aspects and the Rashi aspects. Okay, let's see. Anything else I wanted to mention about that? I don't believe so. I mean, all right. Well, moving on. One last thing. One great thing about this whole process, we're going step by step through building blocks of astrology. It would be great, and some of you are doing it, so I really appreciate this. It would be great if you apply some of these things, test them out on a few charts, and then share your results. That's the best thing about this process in this age, that now we can share things, and you can try them out on your own, and you can say, yeah, I see this works, yeah, this doesn't work. And by doing that, we start to build a body of knowledge that confirms these things. I can confirm them all I want through my own study and charts, but I'm only one person doing this. And there are other people doing it too, but when it comes to good research, we need multiple people pooling their information, sharing their experience. And those of us, or some of you who have more experience, can say, okay, I see what you're doing there. Maybe you missed this thing. Or, yeah, you really make sense there. I should have thought of that. So keep in mind, we want to keep this open. We want to let astrology blossom through our own understanding so we all can contribute to it. But the things that I'm sharing on this YouTube channel and in this particular class, this introduction class, they're things that I found to work consistently over and over and over again. So that's why it's the basics, essentially, the fundamentals. But I enjoy hearing from you in regards to your own experiences and what you see in the charts of other people. Remember to use the charts of other people, because you will be more objective and you'll get better information. It's really hard to use your own chart, but I've said that over and over again. So be well, good studies, and keep meditating, going over your notes, and looking at charts.